So today we will go over the Gestalt principles of design. Now, until now, we talked about elements of design, we talked about principles of design. Now, these principles of design are different than the ones that we talked about. These are the Gestalt principles of design, which also you need to know about when designing. Now, as we go along and we talk about them, you will see that there is sometimes some overlap, like a similarity between some of these principles and some of the ones that we already discussed, and this is normal. But how these principles started is a bit different. So these Gestalt principles of design started like 100 years ago in Germany, when not designers but psychologists tried to understand how the human brain perceives everything. So how the human brain sees and understands what we see around us. And this is very important to understand in design, because every time you are designing something, you want that the viewer looking at this design understands it the way you planned it to be understood. So if I design a poster and I see it in a specific way, but nobody else sees what I want them to see, so I'm not communicating correctly through my design, this is a problem. So all these principles that we discussed until now, and these that I will discuss today, they help us as designers understand better how humans look at things, understand things, perceive things. Okay? So this is a set of principles. As I said, it started a long time ago with the intention to understand. So psychologists were making studies to understand how the human brain works. And they came up with several principles that we will focus on. These 6 principles. Now, we will talk quickly about each one of them and see some examples, so it will not be a very long lecture today, but these principles are very important. Anywhere you have a graphic design to do, these principles are as important as the ones that we discussed. So they help us to basically organize our design, organize it, okay? And make it in a way so that it communicates what we plan it to communicate. Because the main thing in, let's say, graphic design is communication. So if the communication is wrong, then there is a problem. Now, these principles of design, make sure that you know them. So, for example, you know them, you know them. Like, for example, learn them, like principle of proximity, continuation. Make sure you know them. Okay? For the upcoming exams, okay? And of course, understand them. So this you have to know and understand. Also the previous ones that we discussed, like for example, balance, everything that we discussed, repetition. So you need to know the word and you need to understand what it means, okay? Here the same thing. Now, let us see the first one, principle of proximity. Proximity, what does proximity mean? It is basically how close are elements in relation to each other. What elements? The elements on our design. So this is here an element, this is another element, okay? And they are what? Grouped, organized in a particular way. Now proximity is how close they are to the next element. So this space here. Now, if you notice, if you look at these two, this image illustration that we have, most of you will see what? A square and a rectangle, and a triangle. This is what you will see. But in reality, we have what? How many units we have? We have 15 circles. But do you see 15 circles, or do you see a square and a triangle? Now, okay, if you see a square and a triangle, why do you see a square and a triangle and not 15 circles? Because of the proximity principle. So, if you put two elements close close to each other, like these for example, all of them are the same distance from each other. Then we have a big distance, and we have again elements put close to each other. So immediately you see it, ah, I recognize here a square and this is a triangle, when in fact it is 15 circles, but you don't see it that way. So if I am the designer of this and I put these elements close to each other, this is because I want the viewer to see it in a particular way. Now imagine I will do another design. I will put, instead of these here, I will put circle here, here, here. All of them in the same row with the same distance apart. What you will see? You will not see a square triangle. You will see a rectangular shape or 15 circles. So it depends on how you organize these elements. I said it many times this semester. How you organize the elements on a composition, and if you make one small change in this composition, it can create a totally different result. And this is one example. The principle of proximity tells you that if you put elements close to each other, we see them as belonging to each other. And if you put them far away from each other, the same element, we perceive them, see them as not belong to each other. So this is something else. Here, another example of the principle of proximity. Again, we have circles here, or dots, depends on how you see, and the way they are organized, okay? The proximity between them. Okay? Here we have large proximity, here close proximity. So the way they are organized, when you look at it, you see a butterfly. When in fact, there is no butterfly, there is only circles. But how they are organized make you see a butterfly. And on top of that, you read butterfly. So you have text, and you have some organization of some elements. So this and this help you understand it perfectly. But it's very abstract. Is this how a butterfly looks in reality? No. But so all the detail of a butterfly removed, but we still see it as a butterfly. Even if I remove this word, you will still see a butterfly. Okay? It's very abstract. But because of this principle, immediately you recognize objects. The other principle, the law of continuation. So, now when you look at this, for example, whatever it is, what do you see? You see kind of your eyes start going maybe from here to here to here. It's a continuous movement, you see. But maybe nobody is seeing 4 lines, because this is 4 lines actually. Look, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 curved lines, that's it. But the way they are put together, you see it as a continuous shape, a continuous line, a continuous object. So your eyes move from one point to another in a continuous way. This is very important, because this principle, if you remember when we discussed the other principles before, I told you many times that in a design, sometimes you need to guide the viewer's eye from one thing to another. So how do you organize these elements on the page? It can guide the viewer eye. Like for example, this line. If your eye starts here, it goes continuously through here. Or from here, goes continuously through here. Like smooth transition. You don't really see a point. Jump from point to point, from point to point. You don't really look at it that way. You see it as a continuous object. So this is what this law of continuation is. Depending on how you organize, how you put elements together. These are elements. These here are elements. How you put them together, you can create a continuous effect. there is also this, so if you, for example, have two lines and you cross them, you don't, your eyes, when you look at it, you see it as two lines still. You don't see that, okay, this line is cut in half. So you see this first, and then you see this. No, you still see one line, two lines. So if you cut a line with another line, for example, you still see it as continuous. That's how your brain interprets an image, an illustration, depending on how you organize the elements. So do you want the viewers to see this? Do you want to guide the viewer's eyes? This is very important. You need to consciously decide this. So the law of continuity allows us to recognize a shape created by the flow of the lines, the paths, or curves. So we will not see them individually. We will not see individual lines. We will not see individual points. We will see it as a continuous. So this law of continuity also is very important to apply it, especially in graphic design. These principles in graphics, we will see them most of the time, and in products, actually. And we will see some examples later. This is, again, the law of continuity. Now look at this infinity sign. Everybody knows the infinity sign. But see how abstract it is here. So it's not really finished. Like this part, where is it? This part, where is it? So it is just a very abstract version of it. But if you look at it carefully, you see, okay, that's the infinity sign. You understand it. You don't see it as, here we have a curved line, here we have another line, here we have another line. You don't look at it that way. You see, I recognize this is the infinity sign. Because of how these elements are put together. Okay? And it can be very abstract. And you still understand it. And your eyes flow, because this is the continuity. Look, it flows endlessly. Even though here, in this illustration, it stops. Look, stop. This is alone, this is alone, this is at a right angle here, but you don't see these details. So, now when you look at a complete design, anything, poster, anything, you look at it as a whole, and you understand it as a whole, not as parts. But you as a designer, you need to understand how to manipulate the parts. The parts are the elements. Where to put what to change, everything you move, you change, create a different effect. So you need to do this as designer consciously. I know what I'm doing, so that it communicates to the viewer something. But the viewer will not see this. They will not see how I manipulated every single line, every single dot. But if someone asks me as a designer, I need to explain why I did it. What is the point of it? What is the goal? If you ask someone who is not a designer, he doesn't need to know. He doesn't need to understand, looking at this design, I feel happy. But why? He doesn't need to know. But as a designer, you need to explain, how did you make this design to look happy? How? How did you manipulate the elements? So these principles are very, very important. This is another example for the principle of continuation, or the law of continuation. Now, if you look at this at once, like first time you see it, it kind of looks like a tunnel, okay? A tunnel. And then if you look more carefully, you see, this tunnel looks like a D. And then if you look more carefully, you will see, but these are lines. D, 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 D. So we have the letter D repeated. And if you remember in the previous principle, we had a principle called repetition. Like if you take something and you repeat it, and you can change the size, it can create different effects. So here, this is the law of continuation. So here, when you see this, you see not a line D or a letter D. You see a continuous tunnel that gets, you know, like into, towards this point, okay? And you see it that way. Only if you look very careful, you recognize, okay, this looks like a D, and these are actually lines, repeat, 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 the same letter. But first time you see it as something continuous, getting smaller or going into the distance, a tunnel, okay? So, what effect do I want to create? Again, should I use this principle or not in my design, and for what reason? Everything must have a reason. Another principle, the law of similarity. What does it say? The human brain creates groups of elements based on proximity. This we know. So if something, we put two elements close to each other, we see it as belonging to each other, as a group. Okay. But this does not only mean that if I put two things together, okay, I see them as a group, but there are other methods. For example, here, look at these dots or circles. All of them are placed with the same distance. Notice, all of them are placed in the same distance apart, so the same proximity. But you still see them as two groups. You see this as a group and this as a group. Why? Because of the color change. So if we change the color, even if the proximity is in the same location, the same distance, we still see them as different groups. So just a color change can make us immediately see, this is divided into this group, this into that group. Or if we change the shape, like immediately if you look at these, they are all in the same proximity from each other, the same distance. But these are triangles and these are circles. So we see this as a group immediately, just because it's a different shape. So changing the shape, changing the color is as important as changing the distance from each other of the elements to make something look like a group or not a group. Also, the similarity between the shapes. Like for example, here what do we have? Circles. Circle, 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 circle. Do we have a color change? No. All of them the same color, the same shape. But we have a change of size. Look, for example, this is here a small circle. This is a small circle. When we look at it, we feel they belong together somehow. They're in a group, even though they are very far apart. Okay? And look at these two. They look the same. So, we think this and this, somehow there is something similar between them. They belong together in some way. And this is alone. So this is something, this is something, this is something. Even though they are far away from each other. So proximity is one way to manipulate what is belong to each other and what not. Color is another. Changing of the shape another. The way it looks. So even if you have everything the same, changing the size or changing the way something looks, also immediately your mind starts putting them in groups. So this is very important to understand. Now, the law of similarity can be used to, we already explained what it is for, but look for example at this here. Now, if we look at all of these, like the shapes, the colors, everything, it's kind of cool, cold colors used, dark colors used, and then suddenly what do we see? Ooh, pink. Like, very different colors suddenly. All of this is kind of in one way or another have similarity between them, but then we have this pink suddenly, rectangle standing out here. So the law of similarity can be used to create emphasis or no emphasis. So here we have element, 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 a lot of elements of design. They are put in this composition. And if I want to put emphasis on something or draw the attention, I can make something very different. Now this is very similar to a principle we discussed before. want to draw attention to something. It's very similar. So here, as we said, some of these principles overlap the ones that we already discussed. Okay? But this is the focus on how people see. So if you open this website and you just look around, immediately your eye will go here, because this is different now. This is different than the rest, mainly in color, okay? In color. Because here we have also rectangle, but they're blue, so they don't stand out as much as this. So that we have also extreme contrast here. You have to understand, even though we learn principle by principle by principle, they, in a real composition, in a real design, you can find a lot of them combined in one. So we have here extreme contrast, we have here focal points, we have this and that, and we have the law of similarity also applied. Another principle, it's called the principle of closure. It basically tells you that when you design something, you don't need to always have it a complete shape. Like, for example, this is what, when you look at it, you see it as a complete, like your eyes go and see it as a complete shape. But in fact, this is open, 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 open. But your eyes still perceive it as closed. This is a good example here. This is the real object. And then the designer take it, make it more simple, more abstract, remove some of the details. But still we understand it. And then you can take it even further, make it even more abstract, and still understand it. So how much can you take a real object, abstract, 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 simplify, simplify, and the viewer still understand it? And this is super important, because if you're a graphic designer and you're designing a logo, or you're designing signs and symbols, we said before that they are always abstract. You cannot see a logo with detail, 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 every single detail. You cannot. And there is a reason for that. Or a sign or a symbol. Always, you see them very abstract, very, not a lot of details. As little as possible detail, so that the viewer who looks at it, the more detail you put, the more difficult it becomes. Like, okay, maybe I can see it as a wheel, but the problem is with the details. I start focusing on this detail, on that detail, and it takes me time sometimes, more time to understand the logo. Imagine a very complicated logo, a lot of details. I look at it and I try to, okay, it's difficult to understand, it takes a long time to understand, I cannot remember it easily. Now, the more detail I have, the more difficult it becomes to remember. Logos have to be remembered very quickly, understood very fast. Immediately you can recognize them. Signs and symbols, the same thing. Fast recognition, fast communication, immediate communication. You don't have time to sit in front of a sign or a symbol and try to understand it. Immediately you have to understand. So abstraction helps in that. So applying what? These principles, the principles of closure is one way. So we don't have to put every detail, every line into something to be understood and clear. In fact, in most designs, it is desirable to make it abstract. The more complicated you make it, the more it's prone to difficulty in communication. So also these here, they're separate. They're separate. But somehow, how it's designed, it looks like they're close. They're close. You see this as a square, but there is no square here. Okay? So these principles you can play around a lot to create some desired effect. Look at this. Can you read it or not? Depth. Everybody can read it. But not every detail is placed. So where are these lines here? Where is this line, this line, this? A lot of missing parts. But you don't need them to understand. You can still understand. As long as you understand, it's correct. So you don't need to put every single detail into a design. Look at this. This could be a logo. Okay? So, it actually says here, this principle is widely used in logo design. So, they keep their work minimalistic. When we say minimalistic, very, very simple and abstract. And most logos, look at them, they are very abstract, okay? But meaningful. Now, when we look at this, this is like a cat. Everybody understands it as a cat, but it's not a cat really. Look at this shape here. This is like a positive, negative space that we discussed before, positive, negative. Now, when we look at this, this shape has no meaning. No, it's a very abstract shape. And when we look at this here, it is actually a circle, two circles, and some other shape. But when we see it as a whole, we see a cat. We recognize this as a cat face, and this is the tail and the body. But, okay, this as a logo is much better than if you actually draw a cat with all the details. Okay? Not suitable for design. Not suitable for anything. Now logos, also another reason why they are very abstract is because, you see, sometimes you need to print them on a paper, very small, like let's say on a business card. You have your logo, your name. Now the logo is very small. And sometimes you print it bigger on a poster, okay? Now, if you have a lot of details, like a lot of lines, a lot of details, shapes, and you print it very small, you cannot see. You cannot see it. So this is another reason why abstract is better, simplified is better. And also, if I want to make something realistic, maybe it will need a lot of colors, a lot of transitions between one color and another color, values, I don't know. And again, most of the time, when you print something, you print it black and white for to be cheaper. Not always the logo printed in color. So, when you design a logo, you have to design it to work for black and white. So, if you print it black and white, is that clear? Or all these colors and transitions, when you print them as grayscale, what they will become? Maybe not so clear, okay? And the more detail you have, the more not clear it becomes. So try to look at these things around you and see and ask yourself, okay, what if this was in a different way? Would it be clear or not? Would it be understood or not? So this principle, all of them, if you notice, they simplify things, okay? Principle of figure ground. Now this is very, very similar to the one we discussed. Remember the space, we have positive, negative space again, foreground, background. And the thing here to understand is that the human mind, always when you look at something, in your mind you start organizing, okay, which is the front, which is the background, which is the front, so which is the figure, and which is the background. Without you thinking, your brain just starts organizing. I look at a design, okay, which is at the front, which is at the back. Immediately my brain starts thinking, okay? So we always have foreground, which is the figure, and a background. Now, if you're the designer, you consciously design something to be at the front or at the back, to be understood, or sometimes to be interchangeable, like we don't really know. Is this here the white space at the front, or is this at the front? Maybe this is as important as this, so we want both to stand out. It doesn't matter which is at the front, which is at the back. Sometimes I want to make it very clear which is at the front, which is at the back. Here, what do we see? The apple. Oh, and we see another face here, okay? but this is part of the background. Or maybe this is the background, but maybe this is at the front. And this face may be at the front, and this sign at the back. And what is more interesting, you can see, so using this method, you can see more than one object. Like here I can see a face, and I can see this sign. Here I can see the apple, and I can see a face. Here what do we see? We see a circle, we see a square. Which is at the front, which is at the back, that's another story. But we see two objects. So, when you're designing something, do you want the viewer to see two objects or just one? Do you want to make it very clear which is at the front, which is at the back? But then again, this will influence how you design something. But always, our brain tries to organize things as something is at the front, something is at the back. Okay? There's always this organization happening. Look at this design of this logo. Okay? Actually, poster or part of a logo. This is a logo, and here it describes to you. So when you look at it, some objects stand as a figure, as a foreground, and some as a background. Now, do you understand it? Everybody, do you see? Like I can see here two bottles. I can see here an alien face. So I can see two different objects, the face and the bottles. I can see them. Okay? So two different things in one. And then, of course, the words and this and the rest of the information. And look how simplified, no detail, and still it is clear, very clear what it is. Okay? The law of symmetry and order. Okay. In our mind, okay, always when we look at something, even if it's a total chaos, a disorder, we try always, it's not a conscious process, it's unconscious, okay? When we try to look at something that looks kind of messy, disordered, chaotic, we try to find some order in it. This is why, for example, when you look at the sky, you look at the sky outside and you see all these clouds, sometimes you start looking at, there is no meaning. But then, I can see like a face here, or I can see something there, or you start recognizing patterns, something that makes sense to you. And this is how the human brain works. We don't want to look at something and it to remain a chaos. We have to look for something to make sense of it, to make an order. And so, the symmetry and order, we always try to look for some order, some symmetry in what we look around us. Also when we design, we seek order, like some kind of an order. And this is very important here for the human mind. When I look at a composition, this is a composition of elements. I see them as, okay, I can see symmetry. It's like, okay, this is the same like this, it's flipped upside down. Immediately I recognize the order. It's beautiful. It's kind of ordered, it has symmetry, it's organized. So the feeling of, the positive feeling that, this is beautiful, could be based sometimes on, because it is ordered in a particular way. There is order. It doesn't have to be always total symmetry. Like this, for example, if you cut it in half, symmetry, this here, symmetry, okay. But this here, you don't see like clear symmetry. But if you look at it, like you feel there is order in it. But in fact, you have a centralized, this object, and it's rotated here, rotated here, rotated here. So that's a different type of order. So it doesn't have to be that everything has to be this equal to this, but there is the order, okay? And our brain always seeks this. Here, for example, we have in this logo. This is a logo. We have, in a way, symmetry, but centralized, you know. So this object is again rotated here, rotated here, rotated here. So the same object. This plus this. these two elements, rotate. The color change only. And what else do we have here? We have another principle, proximity. Why do we see this as belong together? But this is a color, different colors. Okay, well, we have a repetition of shapes, and we have close to each other. Now, if I take this and I put it here, you will not maybe feel it belongs to the group. So it is the shapes and the proximity here. How close you put them together that make you feel like, oh, okay, this is a group, this is another group. This is a group, this is another group. Okay? Now, let's see very quickly how these principles are applied to some real products. Because this is not only for totally for graphic design on a 2D poster or business card or whatever. No, real products are organized according to principles of design also. So look at this, again, this picture, we've seen it before maybe. Look, for example, these buttons, okay? They look like what? Circles. Circle. Circle, 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 circle. All of them here, these circles are the same size, the same color, and what? The same distance, proximity from each other. So if you see this in a real product, you feel that this is a group. Why do you feel this is a group? Because of these applied principles. So we have a shape, we have a size, we have a distance, we have colors here applied. So a lot of elements of design, but because we are talking about these, the Gestalt principles, we can clearly see now the distance matters, the shape matters, okay? The color application matters. Now, if we look at these three, this is the same shape, the same shape. They are far away from each other, but the same distance, huh? And they are the same shape, the same color. So again, we see it as a group. And let's hear something interesting. So here we have visual coherence of the whole product. So it says here that some of these curves are repeated. So this curve repeated here, repeated here, repeated here, repeated here. So, for example, but this is not only about the curves, also the shapes, everything, okay? There is repetition. So this creates a visual coherence. What is that? We talked about before, last class, consistency of style. And I said that when you design something, it is very important when we discuss the harmony. So to make a design to be harmonious, if you say, oh, this product looks harmonious, it is because somewhere in the details it uses consistency of style. I said this is a very important word. This word, visual coherence, means the same thing. Because some elements are repeated, the way it's designed with this repeating elements, it creates a harmonious design. So when we discussed harmony last class, so if you want your design to be harmonious, you need to have elements that repeat each other. And to do this, you can apply some of the Gestalt principles to also make it even stronger. So always a design, it is a combination of elements and of principles in the end. Here more examples. Now here it's not very clear from where you are, but here in this product, we see here there is a triangle up and a triangle down. And we see this as a group because these are close to each other, the same shape, and they are very different than the other shapes. So I don't care what this is. I don't care what product this is. You know, I look at it and I apply the same elements and principles of design that I learned. It is like a graphic 2D design. So I'm designing this. I don't see this as a button. I see this as a shape. This is a shape, 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 shape. and I organize them in a specific way. So, if you know the elements of design and you understand the principles, you can design anything to be visually clear, easy to understand, enjoyable to look at, and so on. Okay? Here, for example, here, again, we have a real product, okay? And you see what? Little squares, square. But look, why? Who's talking? Who's talking? When you look at this, even though this is a square like this one, you see this as a group, and you see these as a group. This is also as a group. Why? Okay, because of the color change. The color changed, the same shape, just the color was changed. And the proximities, they are close to each other, and of a different color. Okay, visually we understand that this must be a group. This is another group, this is another group. These are different shapes, and they are close to each other. This also visually makes you feel this is a group. It's very important no matter what you design. What do you want the viewer to see? These are all stars, but do you see them as one group? No. This is a group, this is a group. Because of the color change, and because this distance is bigger than this distance. So these are close, and then also on top of that, different color. So combining things can make something more stronger. The effect, the final effect. Here again, more explanations of the same that we explained. So if you look at, this is not very clear picture, but this is from a microwave. If you look at home, maybe you have a microwave and you see these graphic elements. Who is the designer of these? Graphic designers, even though this is a microwave, but you are involved in designing these. So if you look very closely at them, you will see, okay, this one looks like a fish, this is like a chicken, this, you can see actually, this is a fish, this is a chicken, but if you look at the design of it, you will see it's very abstract, simplified. Look carefully at the design, you will see how the principles are applied that we discussed today. So, you don't see details, very, very abstract, but in the end you can understand it immediately. This is a fish, this is a chicken, without any details. Okay? And with everything, it's like that. With everything. You need to, when you look at shapes, designs, final, complicated designs, look at it very carefully, and you will discover how the designer manipulated the small elements, combined them, organized them using principles of design, to end up with the final result that when you look at, you get an impression. What do you feel as a final result? But you as a designer need to understand what happened there. If you don't understand, you cannot design. You cannot design something that communicates something to me that you plan to communicate to me. Okay? So now, these principles of design, let me see if we have more examples here. Well, the same things, just more visual examples of the different principles. So, this, I advise you, these principles of design, the Gestalt principles. Look at them, open the internet, try to see more examples. So, put the name and try to see what come up. And look at it very carefully. You will see a lot of examples coming up. So, to understand it more. If there is something still not clear, open, try to understand more yourself. Okay? Now, let me continue. Now, very important. What will happen next class? First, let me see the time because we have a meeting. Let me see.